DJ scream, heavy in the streets.
We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood. We gon' get it, we gon' get it, we gon' get it. We gon' get it, we gon' get it. Get it in blood. Get it in blood.
Good rich.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Saints and Appetizers podcast. And I'm Ethan. And just like the intro says, get it in blood and get it out the mud. And Luke Rockhold definitely got it in blood, and Leon Edwards definitely got it out of the mud tonight in those fights. And this is the UFC reaction show, post-show reaction show. And man, I definitely underestimated this card. I didn't, and that seems to happen a lot when I or just anyone underestimates the card. Says, "Oh, these fights probably aren't going to be any good, or there aren't really any good fighters on the card. Name worthy fighters, or oh, I'm not too excited about this card." Well. That definitely came back to bite me. That statement came back to bite me. It didn't age too well, but hey, I'm not upset about that. I'm glad that came back to haunt me or whatever. It actually came back to gift me. It came back to reward me. That statement. I should probably say that every time, because I was gifted with some great fights, interesting fights, if nothing else, and a historic finish in the main event. But anyways, let's get into that. And so can I get a menu? Let's get right into that first fight on the main card. And that's the light heavyweight matchup between Tyson Pedro and Harry Handsucker. And this fight went exactly how I expected to. I said it was going to be, if anything, I thought someone's going to get knocked out. Someone's going to get knocked out, and I expected it probably to be early. I thought it was going to be in the first round, and it did. It happened a minute and five seconds into the first round, and I picked Tyson Pedro to win that one, and I just basically I thought no matter what, I knew someone was going to get knocked out in this fight. And Harry Handsucker, he was coming down from heavyweight, and he looked good coming down from heavyweight, and I could see why he was coming down from heavyweight, because if you were to tell me that he was a heavyweight at one time, it would have been a little hard for me to believe, because he didn't even really look that much bigger than Tyson Pedro, but he definitely made the cut very easily and looked good. It had me a little worried there at first, because I was like, man, he looks big, strong, healthy at heavyweight, but he did not look good in his performance at all, because their first meeting in the middle of the ring, their first encounter, he just took a very strong jab right to the cheekbone, and it stunned him very, very, very bad, and he backed up and then took a kick to the stomach, and that was all she wrote. He took a hard shot to the orbital bone in the face, and then took that kick to the stomach, and that was all she wrote. That was it. And that fight didn't last very long, but that was a great fight to actually kick off the pay-per-view, and definitely how I expected the fight to go. But what wasn't a fight just name marquee, but for excitement, people, no matter what, people want to see finishes, and that's definitely what you got out of that fight. But anyways, and Tyson Pedro, he obviously looked good. I think maybe Harry Hunsucker was maybe kind of fed to him to to as maybe a jag or a can to maybe help build up his record, because maybe he'd been struggling a little bit. And I mean, he's still a relatively young guy, only 30 years old, but that kind of helps his record. He's now on a 2-fight win streak with two finishes in a row by knockout. One, the TKO last night and the KO before that. So he's on a little bit of a win streak now, and he's definitely a physically imposing light heavyweight, and he's from Australia. Got an Aussie oi 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 chant from the Utah crowd, and that was a great crowd in Utah. That's kind of odd that there would be such a, at least to me, it seems like that's an odd crowd to have such a great mixed martial arts and UFC following in Utah, but there definitely was. But anyways, moving on to the next fight, we had the women's bantamweight fight between Lucy Pudlova and Wu Yanya, and I was a little surprised by how this fight went. I thought it was maybe probably just going to be a decision, go to like this decision, because I think Wu Yanya had only been finished once before in her career, and Pudlova had only let's see if I can find it, had only let's see. Well, she had quite a few finishes, but I figured it would just go to decision. But it was pretty clear from Pudlova's time in Octagon, her way at Octagon, like I had said in the previous podcast, the prediction podcast, that she had obviously seasoned and matured and had time to work on her other skills, but she dominated in every position that they ended up in the stand up and in the ground. And she definitely, you could tell that she had, I guess when they were talking about in commentary, that she went her previous time in the UFC, which she had a lot of fights previously in the UFC. She had a 7 previous fights in the UFC. They had said that she didn't have much of a ground game, submission game before she'd gotten to the UFC, but obviously her time away from 2020 to from December 2020 to April 2022, her time in Octagon, she had obviously built up a ground game, because she just completely dominated Wu on the ground and ended up finishing her with elbows, some vicious elbows, man. Those were just some vicious elbows, just came down with about 5 or 6 vicious elbows before the ref came in and stopped it. So I was very surprised. I thought that fight was just going to go to decision, because Wu had just was on a 3-fight losing streak and had lost 4 of her last 5 by decision. So that's why I figured that if she was going to lose, she was probably going to just lose by decision again. But that's not how that fight lost. She just ended up just getting brutalized by and losing by TKO by decision in the second round uh, at at 4 minutes 4:04 of the second round. But yeah, another TKO finish, which, like I said, everyone wants to see finishes. No matter who it is, people love seeing knockouts, brutal knockouts, and especially women's fights. You know, a lot of times it's a little less common in women's division seeing knockouts and things like that, especially in that fashion with those devastating elbows. And on to the next fight, we had the bantamweight matchup between Merab Dashvili and Jose Aldo. And this fight went like the first fight on the main card between Tyson Pedro and Harry Hunsucker. This fight went exactly how I expected it to. It just went between Merab Dashvili and Jose Aldo. It went between Merab Dashvili and Jose Aldo. It went just kind of went back and forth from Merab Dashvili doing a little bit of striking and kind of trying to take control control Jose Aldo up against the cage, trying to take him down, just pressure, and just trying to grind out a decision win. And that's pretty much all he did. It wasn't an exciting fight. And like I said, the Utah crowd, that they were good, and it seemed like they were pretty educated, but they did start booing a couple times and late into the round. But when Jose Aldo came out, when he was in his entrance and when he was being announced, they obviously had a lot more respect for him and they were cheering him. So there was obviously a big Jose Aldo following. So I don't know whether they would have booed regardless, just because there was Jose Aldo fans. And I had said before that I thought Jose Aldo was just, I mentioned his age, and I mentioned that I think that he's kind of a bit of a gatekeeper now, just because of his name and status, and he's just not I didn't want to call him a stepping stone, but I think he is a bit of, like I said, a gatekeeper for people that are setting up to challenge for the bantamweight title. And he looked good. He did look good in the first round. He looked explosive, and that's something that came up several times, is the altitude in YouTube and in Utah. And you could argue maybe that he won the first round, because there was a couple times Merab came in and Jose Aldo caught him with some quick explosive strikes and some knees, but he just didn't look the same after the first round. And then you could really tell in the third round that he was kind of out of it. His mouth was open and he was just constantly backing up, and Merab Dashvili was just constantly coming forward and pressuring him. And like I said, it wasn't that exciting of a fight, but it was a pretty definitive win by Merab Dashvili. But that fight went pretty much exactly how I expected it to. And then on to the co-main event between Paulo Costa and Luke Rockhold. And this was a very interesting fight. And this could be because, like, once again, because of the altitude, and just early on, like I guess towards the end, maybe like a minute left in the third round, Luke Rockhold was like bending over with his hands on his hips. And I guess kind of need to go to the beginning of the fight. It looked like Paulo Costa, he had just obviously been hearing a lot about just Luke Rockhold just having a glass jaw, and that his best avenue to beating him was to just try to knock him out. But he changed his method of trying to win to taking him down, which that was odd, seeing how Luke Rockhold has like gold medals in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and is such a great wrestler. And he ended up dominating a good portion of the first round on the ground and ended up somewhere in there breaking Luke Rockhold's nose. And he was just water falling blood out of his nose there. And then uh, there in the first round, even Luke Rockhold's just literally doubled over trying to breathe for air, and then that's going on throughout the first and third round, and that this fight went um, went for the full 3 rounds. I would have never guessed that, and then it was more of the same in the second round, but there wasn't as much fighting on the ground. And then actually even it was just a lot of Luke Rockhold going back and forth, and he was just looking to load up on shots and pretty much nothing more. He was even just trying like odd spinning attacks, like 360 kicks and question mark kicks, but nothing was really connecting. And Paulo Costa was just kind of going for the knockout, and it was just a crazy fight. And then in the third round, Luke Rockhold actually connected on a couple of those, and it looked like he was maybe going to get close to the knockout, but none of that really matured and came to fruition. And then it looked like Paulo Costa was going to get close to getting a rear naked choke, and you could see he was on the back, and the camera kind of panned, and you could see them talking to each other. And Luke Rockhold was even telling Paulo Costa to go fuck himself, and they were talking back and forth. So that was pretty funny. And then at the very end of the fight, Luke Rockhold actually flipped that around and got full into the full guard of Paulo Costa. And at the very end of the fight, he was rubbing all his face all in Paulo Costa's face, rubbing all his blood and stuff all over his face. I mean, it was just a wild scene. I mean, and so Paulo Costa ended up winning by unanimous decision, but that was just a wild fight. And then when Joe Rogan did the post-fight interviews, Luke Rockhold ended up saying, just like Paulo Costa had been doing in the pre-fight interviews, calling him old. I guess Luke Rockhold ended up admitting to it and ended up hanging up the gloves, which I think at 37 and having been off for 3 years, I think that was probably the right thing to do. But man, he definitely, like I said, he got it in blood and definitely went out on a shield. And I think a lot of people that had been before this fight saying that he had a glass jaw and maybe had him at the butt of a lot of people's jokes probably have a lot more respect for him after that. And that's probably a fight that will go down in the history books as a pretty memorable fight, and it was very enjoyable. And then for the last fight in the main event of the night, we had the welterweight title bout and championship bout between Leon Edwards and Kamaru Usman. And this fight, this is a historical fight, a legendary fight, fight that will definitely go in the Hall of Fame history books, shook the world, and it started out pretty much blowing my mind from the very get-go. Like it kind of went out and was pretty even to start, and then Leon Edwards actually got with about, I don't know, a minute and 30 seconds left or so in the round. Not a lot of time for Leon Edwards to work. Probably even less than that. Maybe just about a minute left. Leon Edwards got Kamaru Usman's back and started trying to sink in a rear naked choke, but man, he just couldn't get it. And there at the very end, they were just kind of fighting and punching each other and more than trying to get the rear naked choke. And that had my eyes wide open when that happened. I was like, oh man, maybe Leon Edwards is more locked in than I thought after that. And so, something that was kind of interesting, even before the fight started, was that Leon Edwards didn't look at Kamaru Usman during the fighter announcements and the touching of gloves. Which they didn't touch gloves, and sometimes that makes me wonder if the fighter is intimidated or is just not wanting to give the other fighter any kind of motivation or bulletin board material, or then that makes me think if that they're in their head, or is that just the GSP kind of method, motive, like, because GSP did that a lot with fighters, trying to get in his head. He would just kind of ignore them, and that always used to work for GSP. So I just wanted to mention that because that kind of played out a little bit later on in the fight, and then through the second through third rounds, just like I'd mentioned in several other of these fights, just Leon Edwards just didn't look the same as he did in the first round. He just looked like a shell of himself throughout that round. It just went on to a little bit of striking from the start of the fight, and then just Kamaru Usman throughout the majority of those rounds, just taking Leon Edwards down and just controlling the majority of the fights throughout the majority of those rounds. And then I guess it was towards the end of the third round, he just went back to his corner and he just sat down and looked just completely dejected, and you just thought like he was pouting, and you just pretty much thought you could maybe just, when you saw that from a fan's perspective, you thought you could just throw in the towel right then and there. It just looked like a bad scene. If you were able to read the room at all, it did not look good at all, just from reading the emotions in the corner for Leon Edwards at the end of the third round. And then it was a lot of the same in the fourth round, and it came to the end, and his cornerman, he had a great cornerman, telling him he needed to get with it. He needs to get a finish if he wants to win. What are we doing here? What did you fight for? Do you want to win the belt? All that. It sounded like he had a thick Jamaican accent, and that was pretty funny hearing him talk like that, trying to get in Leon Edwards' head to tell him to get it together if he wants to win the belt. And you heard a lot of commentary from Daniel Cormier and Joe Rogan and John Anik talking about maybe this is his last chance if he's gonna ever get a title shot again. And that was coming in the fifth round when they were talking about him. And then in the fifth round, this is when the madness and the craziness came. And this was when there was only about 2 minutes left. This was at 4 minutes and 4 seconds of the fifth round. Out of nowhere, with a little right feint, Usman had maybe a overcorrection, you could say, trying to dodge out of the way and kind of pulling back, and a perfectly timed head kick just completely slept Kamaru Usman. And when I first saw it, I was just like flabbergasted. Like, it took me a second to register what even happened. And then for like, I don't even know, probably for like a minute or two straight, I was just like, yo, like screaming, like, what? Like my throat is still sore from that. I was like yelling. I couldn't even register the fight. And I had picked Kamaru Usman to win, and I had, for the most part, he was doing exactly what I had predicted him to do, but I predicted him to probably finish Leon Edwards, but it looks like he was just going to end up getting the decision. But no, that is not what happened. Leon Edwards ended up shaking the universe with that kick. That's just like that. That's one of the craziest finishes I've ever seen. Like within the waning seconds of a fight, that goes up there with the triangle choke by Anderson Silva on Chael Sonnen, like at the very end of the fight, where a fighter's been pretty much getting dominated an entire fight, and then towards the end of the fight, they just throw up a Hail Mary and win. That's what that reminded me of. Very similar to that, and that was just wild. And you could see at the end of the fight, when it showed Kamaru Usman a couple of times, he was still stunned, and I don't think he even knew what was going on. But whoa, that UFC 278. If you missed it, you missed something, because that was a great card. But I think that's all I got for you. And with that, can I get a check, please?